Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked out at the vast fleet surrounding him. 2,000 warriors from across the galaxy filled the ships that moved through space toward a small blue planet. Each warrior had fought on deadly worlds before and lived to tell about it. They were the best soldiers the Zephyrian Empire had ever created. The Admiral's scaled skin reflected the light from the command screens as he studied the data about their target. Earth was listed in their files as a minor death world. The intelligence report said the planet was home to a primitive species called humans, who had barely learned to travel between planets. Their technology was simple, and their bodies were weak compared to other species the Empire had conquered. Kethvar had led successful invasions of 12 other death worlds. Each time the pattern was the same. The local species would fight hard for their world, but they lacked organization and advanced weapons. Within days or weeks, the resistance would collapse and another world would join the Empire. Earth would be no different. The warrior species filling his ships were proof of the Empire's power. Krillian berserkers stood 8 feet tall with natural armor that could stop bullets. Their chitinous shells had evolved on worlds where everything tried to kill everything else. Fourth-hand assassins could phase through solid matter, making them nearly impossible to catch or kill. Gorlak heavy infantry had bones denser than steel and could carry weapons that would crush normal soldiers. Every warrior aboard the fleet had survived at least 5 Deathworld campaigns. They had fought creatures that breathed fire, and beasts that could tear through metal with their claws. They had conquered worlds where the very air was poisonous and planets where gravity could crush most species flat. Earth, with its comfortable atmosphere and weak inhabitants, would be almost boring. The fleet began its final approach to the blue world below. Sensors showed scattered human settlements and cities, but no significant military installations in space. A few primitive satellites orbited the planet, but nothing that could threaten even the smallest ship in the fleet. The humans seemed to have no idea what was coming for them. What the aliens did not know was that deep beneath a mountain in North America, a man named Jake Morrison was staring at screens that showed their approach. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison worked for something called the United States Space Force, and his job was to watch the skies for exactly this kind of threat. The moment the alien fleet had entered the solar system, alarms had started ringing in hidden facilities across Earth. Morrison picked up a secure phone and spoke calmly into it. Within seconds, similar phones were ringing in the Pentagon, where General Lisa Carter commanded Earth's Space Defense Forces. Commander Ryan Phillips received the call, aboard an orbital platform called Freedom Station that the aliens had somehow missed in their scans. Dr. Helen Brooks at a NASA facility began tracking the incoming ships with instruments the aliens did not know existed. The message Morrison sent was simple, but it changed everything. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and their visitors were not friendly. What happened next would have surprised the aliens if they had been paying attention to anything other than their own overwhelming confidence. Every major government on Earth had planned for this day. Military leaders had studied every science fiction movie and book they could find. Scientists had calculated what humanity would need to survive an alien invasion. Engineers had built weapons and systems in secret that could work even if the aliens had technology far beyond human understanding. The aliens expected to find a divided world where different human groups fought each other instead of working together. They thought they would face primitive weapons and confused resistance. Instead, they were about to encounter something that had never existed before in the galaxy. They were about to fight a species that had spent thousands of years learning how to wage war against enemies exactly as smart and adaptable as themselves. Kethvar gave the order to begin the invasion, and landing ships separated from the main fleet. Each ship carried a full assault force aimed at major human population centers. New York and London and Beijing would fall first. The humans would see their greatest cities burning and surrender within hours. At least that was the plan. The landing ships entered Earth's atmosphere like falling stars. Their energy shields glowed as they pushed through the air toward their targets. The aliens inside checked their weapons and prepared for what they expected to be a quick and easy victory. Some were already thinking about the rewards they would receive for conquering another world for the Empire. Captain Danny Rodriguez was walking through Central Park in New York when the first alien ship appeared overhead. The massive vessel was larger than any building Rodriguez had ever seen. It blocked out the sun as it descended, and the sound of its engines shook windows throughout the city. Trees were crushed flat as the ship landed and the ground shook like an earthquake. Rodriguez was a soldier with the 82nd Airborne Division, and he had trained for combat his entire adult life. But nothing had prepared him for the sight of the ship's ramp lowering, and the creatures that emerged from inside. The first aliens looked like giant insects walking on two legs. Their natural armor gleamed in the sunlight, and the weapons they carried hummed with energy that made the air itself seem to vibrate. Behind the insect soldiers came aliens that looked almost human except for their pale skin and the way they seemed to flicker in and out of solid form. At the back of the group came massive creatures that had to weigh as much as small cars. Their weapons were so large that human soldiers would need machines to lift them. Rodriguez pulled out his radio with hands that were perfectly steady despite what he was seeing. His training took over and he spoke into the device with a calm voice that betrayed none of the fear he felt. He reported what he was seeing and requested immediate support. Then he did something that the aliens would never understand. He followed a plan that every soldier on Earth had memorized. Within 30 seconds of Rodriguez sending his message, every cell phone in New York received an emergency alert. Every television and radio station switched to emergency broadcasts that had been prepared years in advance. Traffic cameras and security systems and satellites all began feeding information to command centers where human generals prepared to fight for their world. The aliens had expected to fight soldiers and maybe some scared civilians. Instead, they found themselves facing an entire planet that had suddenly transformed into a single massive intelligence network. Every human eye became a spotter for human weapons. Every human with a cell phone became a source of information about alien movements. Every human with knowledge of their city became a guide for soldiers who knew how to use that information. The invasion of Earth had begun, but it was not going to go the way anyone had planned. The alien ships landed in 5 major cities across Earth at exactly the same time. New York was first, followed by London and Beijing and Moscow and Los Angeles. Each ship was the size of several city blocks, and when they landed, they crushed everything beneath them. Buildings collapsed and roads cracked, and the sound could be heard for miles in every direction. Captain Danny Rodriguez watched from behind a damaged car as the ramp of the New York ship opened with a loud hissing sound. Steam poured out of the opening, and then the first aliens appeared. The Krillian soldiers came first, and Rodriguez got his first close look at what humanity was fighting. They stood 8 feet tall, and their bodies were covered in what looked like natural armor made of thick plates. Their weapons glowed with energy and made a humming sound that hurt to listen to. Behind the insect soldiers came the Vorthan infiltrators, who looked almost human, but something was wrong with them. Their skin was too pale, and they seemed to fade in and out like they were not completely solid. Rodriguez realized he was looking at aliens who could become ghosts whenever they wanted. The Gorlak heavy infantry came last, and they were massive creatures that had to duck to fit through the ship's doorway. Their weapons were so large that Rodriguez wondered how they could even lift them. The aliens spread out from their ship and began setting up what looked like a command post. They moved with confidence, like they had done this many times before. Some of them pointed strange devices at the surrounding buildings, while others began placing equipment that Rodriguez did not recognize. They acted like they owned the place already. Rodriguez keyed his radio and spoke the words that every soldier on Earth had been trained to say if this day ever came. He reported hostile extraterrestrial forces and requested immediate implementation of Protocol Omega. Within seconds, his message was being repeated by soldiers and police, officers, and even civilians across all 5 landing sites. Protocol Omega was the result of decades of planning by military strategists who had studied every alien invasion movie and book they could find. The plan was simple but brilliant. If aliens ever invaded Earth, the entire planet would become a single coordinated resistance network. Every human would become part of the fight, whether they were soldiers or not. The response began immediately. Every cell phone in New York received an emergency alert that told people exactly what to do. Citizens were instructed to evacuate to predetermined safe zones, but also to report everything they saw using special codes that had been taught in schools and workplaces for years. Traffic cameras and security systems automatically switched to military control. Satellites began tracking every alien movement and feeding the information to command centers around the world. The aliens had expected to face confused and panicked humans running in all directions. Instead, they found themselves being watched by thousands of cameras and tracked by sensors they did not know existed. Humans hiding in buildings used laser pointers to mark targets for weapons the aliens could not see. Construction workers who knew every tunnel and maintenance shaft in the city began guiding special forces teams through routes that did not appear on any map. Sergeant Amy Walsh led her squad through the subway, tunnels beneath Manhattan carrying weapons that the alien sensors could not detect. The explosives her team carried were simple chemical compounds stored in lead-lined containers. While the aliens scanned for energy signatures and metal objects, Walsh's people were placing charges on the support columns that held up the alien landing zone. The aliens had superior technology, but they had never fought an enemy like humans before. Every other species they had conquered fought in predictable ways. Individual warriors might be dangerous, but they lacked coordination beyond simple pack tactics. Humans were different. They had spent thousands of years fighting wars against other humans and had learned how to coordinate complex operations involving millions of people. First alien casualties came not from humanity's most advanced weapons but from tactics as old as warfare itself. Humans used traps and ambushes and their knowledge of local terrain to turn every street into a potential killing ground. They used mirrors to blind alien sensors and sound systems to confuse alien communications. They used their own city's infrastructure as a weapon against the invaders. In Los Angeles, Captain Lisa Murphy flew her F-35 fighter in what looked like a hopeless battle against an alien aircraft. The alien ship was faster and its weapons were more powerful, and its shields could stop anything Murphy could fire at it. But Murphy was not trying to destroy the alien ship with her weapons. Instead, she led it on a high-speed chase through downtown Los Angeles, where skyscrapers and radio towers and civilian air traffic created a three-dimensional maze. The alien pilot was skilled but had never had to navigate around obstacles while flying at high speed through a crowded urban area. When the alien ship clipped the top of a building and crashed into a parking structure, Murphy had not fired a single shot, but she had won the battle by using the city itself as her weapon. On the ground in Beijing, Corporal Steve Johnson discovered that human infantry could be just as creative as pilots. His squad had learned that alien armor could stop bullets and energy weapons, but it was not designed to handle the kinetic force of a truck loaded with fertilizer explosives and driven by a volunteer who had nothing left to lose. The explosion took out an entire alien patrol and taught the invaders that humans would destroy their own property rather than let aliens have it. The aliens began to adapt their tactics, but humans adapted faster. When the invaders started using human buildings as cover, thinking that humans would not attack their own cities, they learned that humanity had a long history of urban warfare. Entire city blocks became battlefields as humans showed they would rather destroy their own infrastructure than allow it to fall into alien hands. Dr. Patricia Woods worked in a laboratory at MIT, where she studied pieces of alien technology that had been recovered from crashed ships and damaged equipment. What she discovered changed everything. The alien weapons and armor were incredibly advanced, but they were also standardized across their entire military. Every alien soldier carried the same basic equipment configured to fight the same types of enemies. Humans, by contrast, had developed hundreds of different weapons and tactics because they had been fighting each other for their entire history. They were used to facing enemies who could think and plan and adapt just like they could. The aliens were learning that they had picked a fight with the most experienced warriors in the galaxy. Admiral Kethavar stared at the screens in his command center and could not believe what he was seeing. 6 hours had passed since the invasion began, and his forces had lost almost half their soldiers across all 5 landing zones. The reports coming back from the surface made no sense. How could primitive humans be defeating the galaxy's most elite warriors? The Admiral called his intelligence officer Zixal to the command deck and demanded answers. Zixal was a thin Vorthan who specialized in analyzing enemy tactics, and he looked frightened as he approached the Admiral's station. The data he carried painted a picture that neither of them wanted to believe. The humans were not fighting like any Deathworld species the Empire had ever encountered. Most dangerous species relied on individual strength or natural weapons or pack-hunting instincts. They were predictable because they followed patterns that had evolved on their homeworlds. Humans were different. They fought with a level of coordination and tactical complexity that matched the Empire's own military. Zixal showed the Admiral recordings from the battle zones that demonstrated what they were facing. In New York, human soldiers had used the city's subway system to move troops and supplies without being detected by alien sensors. They had turned office buildings into sniper nests and used construction equipment as improvised weapons platforms. Most disturbing of all, they had civilians actively participating in military operations with a level of organization that suggested years of planning. The humans had done something that no other species had ever managed. They had turned their entire planet into a single coordinated military unit. Every human seemed to know exactly what to do when the invasion began. Children used video games to help control drones, while elderly civilians provided intelligence about local terrain. Factory workers had converted production lines to manufacture weapons and ammunition. Even prisoners in jails had been given tasks that supported the war effort. In Los Angeles, the alien ground forces had tried to establish a secure perimeter around their landing site, but discovered that humans understood urban warfare better than anyone in the galaxy. Captain Lisa Murphy continued to lead alien aircraft into trap situations while ground forces used the city's infrastructure against the invaders. Traffic control systems were reprogrammed to create confusion. Water mains were ruptured to flood alien positions. Power grids were selectively shut down to deny the aliens access to human technology, while preserving power for human military operations. The aliens adapted their tactics, but found that humans adapted faster. When alien forces began using energy shields to protect their positions, humans switched to kinetic weapons that could not be deflected. When aliens started jamming human communications, humans used old-fashioned signal flags and messenger systems that required no technology at all. When aliens tried to cut off human supply lines, they discovered that humans had been stockpiling weapons and supplies in hidden locations for decades. Corporal Steve Johnson led his squad through the ruins of downtown Miami, where they had been hunting alien stragglers for 2 days. His team had learned that human weapons might not be able to penetrate alien armor directly, but physics still worked the same way everywhere in the universe. A truck moving at 60 miles per hour carried enough kinetic energy to crush any armor, and humans had lots of trucks. The aliens tried to use human civilians as shields, thinking that humans would not risk harming their own people. They learned quickly that humans had a different approach to acceptable losses than other species. Human commanders were willing to sacrifice buildings and infrastructure and even lives if it meant stopping the invasion. This was not cruelty, but calculation. Humans understood that losing some people now was better than losing everyone. Later, Dr. Patricia Woods made another important discovery in her laboratory at MIT. The alien technology was not just standardized, but it was designed to fight specific types of enemies. Their weapons were optimized for targets with certain types of armor and skin density. Their sensors were calibrated to detect energy signatures and metal compositions that were common among other galactic species. Human technology used different materials and energy sources that often made it invisible to alien detection systems. More importantly, the aliens had never fought an enemy that could reverse engineer their technology in real time. Human scientists were studying every piece of alien equipment they could get their hands on and figuring out how it worked. Within hours of the first alien weapons being captured, human engineers were building countermeasures and improved versions. The pattern repeated in all 5 battle zones. In London, human forces used the city's ancient tunnel systems to move undetected, while civilian volunteers provided constant intelligence updates. In Beijing, the Chinese military demonstrated that human tactical doctrine had evolved far beyond what the aliens expected from a supposedly primitive species. In Moscow, Russian forces showed that humans could fight effectively in winter conditions that slowed down alien equipment. What terrified the aliens most was discovering that humans seemed to enjoy the challenge. Other species fought desperately when cornered, but humans appeared to thrive on combat against superior enemies. They adapted their tactics constantly and found new ways to exploit alien weaknesses faster than the aliens could adapt to human strategies. The turning point came when Sergeant Amy Walsh's demolition charges detonated beneath the New York landing site. The alien ship had been built to withstand attacks from space, but not from underground explosions that collapsed the ground beneath it. The massive vessel tilted and partially sank into the subway tunnels that Walsh's team had been mining for hours. Similar disasters struck the other landing sites as humans demonstrated their mastery of unconventional warfare. In Los Angeles, alien forces found themselves trapped in a stadium where human engineers had turned the structure into a giant cage. In Beijing, the alien ship was disabled when human hackers found a way to interfere with its power systems using civilian broadcasting equipment. Admiral Kethvar realized that his invasion was not just failing but had become a complete disaster. Worse yet, the humans were learning from every encounter and becoming more effective with each battle. They were not just defending their world but studying their enemies and preparing for what might come next. The Admiral made a decision that would have been unthinkable 6 hours earlier. He ordered all surviving ground forces to retreat to their ships and prepare for immediate departure. The invasion of Earth was over, and the Zephyrian Empire had suffered its first major defeat in over 1,000 years. By the third day of what was supposed to be a quick invasion, the situation had completely reversed. The aliens who had come to conquer Earth were now trapped in small groups across the planet, with no way to reach their ships or contact their fleet. Human forces controlled every major city and were hunting down the surviving invaders one by one. Master Sergeant Tony Rivera moved through the ruins of downtown Miami with his squad looking for alien stragglers who might still be hiding in the wreckage. The city had been badly damaged during the fighting, but humans had proven they were willing to destroy their own buildings rather than let aliens use them for cover. Rivera's team knew every street and alley and hiding place because this was their home, and they had been preparing for this fight for years. Rivera heard movement in an abandoned shopping mall and led his squad inside to investigate. What he found surprised him more than anything that had happened during the invasion. 5 aliens were hiding in what used to be a clothing store, trying to treat their wounds with supplies they had scavenged from human medical kits. When they saw Rivera and his soldiers, they did something that no alien warrior was supposed to do. They tried to surrender. The group consisted of aliens from different species. Krakth was a Krillian squad leader whose natural armor was cracked and damaged. Vexna was a Vorthon scout, whose ability to phase through matter had been damaged by human electromagnetic weapons. Thurok and Gorim were Gorlak heavy infantry whose squad had been wiped out in an ambush 3 days earlier. The 5th alien was the biggest surprise of all. Yilth was not a warrior but a science officer who had been studying human society before the invasion began. She was small and fragile compared to the others, and had never been meant for combat duty. When she spoke to Rivera in broken but understandable English, her words changed everything about how the war would end. Rivera had been trained to follow rules of engagement that had been hastily written to deal with intelligent alien prisoners. Instead of killing the survivors, he made the decision to take them captive and report their capture to his commanding officer. Colonel Janet Martinez decided that live alien prisoners would be more valuable than dead ones and ordered Rivera to bring them to a secure facility for questioning. Dr. Karen Lewis was a scientist who studied alien life forms and had been reassigned to military intelligence when the invasion began. Her job was to learn everything possible from the captured aliens about their technology and their empire. What Yilth told her during their first interview made it clear that Earth's victory was only the beginning of a much larger problem. The Zephyrian Empire controlled 3,000 star systems and had conquered over 400 different species during its expansion across the galaxy. When news of the failed invasion reached the imperial capital, the response would be swift and overwhelming. The Empire would not send another small invasion force, but would dispatch a full extermination fleet with enough firepower to burn Earth's surface clean of all life. Dr. Lewis shared this information with military commanders, who realized that humanity faced a terrible choice. They could kill the alien prisoners and hope the Empire never learned what happened to the invasion fleet. Or they could allow some aliens to escape and carry a message back to their leaders. The message would be a warning that Earth was not defenseless and that any future invasion would cost the Empire more than they were willing to pay. Captain Nicole Hayes of Naval Intelligence was assigned to work with the alien prisoners and help them understand what kind of species humanity really was. She worked with Air Force pilot Major Chris Thompson to develop a plan that would allow the 5 survivors to reach a functional escape pod that had been recovered from the wreckage of the alien fleet. The plan would not be simple or easy. The aliens would have to cross 50 miles of territory that was now completely controlled by human military forces. Every soldier and police officer and civilian volunteer had standing orders to eliminate any alien survivors on site. The journey would serve as humanity's final demonstration of exactly what the Zephyrian Empire would face if they decided to continue their war against Earth. Hayes explained to the aliens that their escape would not be a rescue but a test. They would have to prove they could survive in a world that had been turned into a hunting ground, designed specifically to kill their kind. If they succeeded in reaching the escape pod, they would be allowed to leave Earth and return to their empire. If they failed, they would die like the rest of their invasion force. The aliens understood that this was not mercy, but calculation. The humans wanted them to survive so they could tell their leaders about Earth's defenses and capabilities. The 5 survivors would become living proof that humanity was not prey but predator, and that any future conflict would be far more costly than the Empire had ever imagined. Yoth asked why the humans were willing to let them live when they could simply kill all the prisoners and hide the evidence of what had happened. Hayes explained that humanity wanted the Zephyrian Empire to know exactly what they were dealing with. Earth would not hide or run or pretend to be weak. Instead, they would send a clear message that any species wanting to conquer humanity would have to be prepared for the consequences. The alien prisoners were given basic supplies and equipment, but nothing that would make their journey easy. They would have to use their own skills and intelligence to survive the trip, while human forces demonstrated exactly how dangerous Earth had become for any alien visitor. The journey would take them through urban ruins where automated defense systems activated when alien technology was detected. They would travel through forests where human hunters used primitive weapons that could not be detected by advanced sensors. They would pass through industrial areas where civilian workers had converted factories into weapon production facilities. Major Thompson would accompany the aliens as their guide, but also as their guard. His job was to make sure they understood everything they saw and heard during their escape. By the time they reached their ship, the 5 survivors would know more about human military capabilities than any alien in the galaxy. They would carry back detailed knowledge of how humans fought and why they had proven impossible to conquer. The journey began at dawn on the 4th day after the invasion had ended. The journey took 3 weeks, and it became the most terrifying education any alien had ever received about what humans were capable of when they decided to make war. Major Chris Thompson and Captain Nicole Hayes led the 5 alien survivors across 50 miles of territory that had been transformed into a demonstration of human military thinking and industrial capability. For the aliens, it was like walking through a nightmare where every step revealed something new about why their invasion had failed so completely. Kracht had fought on 12 different Deathworlds and conquered species that most of the galaxy considered impossible to defeat. But he had never seen anything like what humans had built in just 3 days of warfare. The first lesson came as they left Miami and entered what had been a quiet suburban neighborhood before the invasion. Human engineers had turned every house and yard into part of an elaborate trap system that activated automatically when it detected alien technology. Motion sensors connected to improvised explosive devices. Doorways rigged to collapse when alien-sized creatures tried to pass through them. Even children's toys had been converted into surveillance devices that tracked alien movement and reported back to human command centers. Thompson explained to the aliens that none of this had existed before their invasion began. Humans had built all of these defenses in less than 72 hours, using nothing but ordinary civilian supplies and basic engineering knowledge. The aliens realized they were looking at a species that could turn any environment into a weapon faster than most civilizations could even recognize a threat. They traveled through forests where civilian hunters used techniques passed down through generations to track and eliminate alien scouts. The humans moved through the trees without making any sound and used weapons that were hundreds of years old but still deadly effective. Crossbows and compound bows fired arrows that could not be detected by alien sensors until they hit their targets. Hunting rifles loaded with ammunition that had been modified with materials salvaged from alien equipment. Vexna had been trained as an infiltrator and scout, but watching human hunters work made her understand why alien reconnaissance teams had been so completely eliminated. These humans had been hunting dangerous prey in difficult terrain for their entire lives. They knew how to read tracks and predict movement patterns and set up ambushes that were impossible to detect until it was too late. In Detroit, they witnessed something that made even the massive Gorlak soldiers step back in fear. Human factory workers had converted an automobile assembly line into a weapons manufacturing facility that was producing anti-alien ammunition at a rate that exceeded the output of some entire planets. The workers moved with practiced, Efficiency turning raw materials into finished weapons faster than the aliens had thought possible. Dr. Raymond Clark was the scientist in charge of the facility, and he gave the alien survivors a tour that was designed to send a very specific message back to the Zephyrian Empire. He showed them human-built copies of alien plasma rifles that had been reverse-engineered and improved using human manufacturing techniques. He demonstrated armor-piercing ammunition that could penetrate Krillian natural armor and Gorlak bone density. The most disturbing part of the tour came when Dr. Clark showed them prototype weapons, based on alien technology but redesigned according to human military doctrine. Where alien weapons were built for efficiency and standardization, the human versions were built for maximum lethality and adaptability. The humans had taken alien science and made it more dangerous than the original designers had ever intended. Yilth asked how humans had learned to modify alien technology so quickly when they had never encountered it before. Dr. Clark explained that humans had been preparing for this possibility for decades by studying every piece of information they could find about theoretical alien science. When real alien technology finally arrived, human scientists already had frameworks for understanding and improving it. The aliens saw human children attending school, where they learned mathematics and science and engineering principles that would let them build weapons and defenses against future alien invasions. They saw elderly humans teaching young people skills like metalworking and electronics that could be used to create military equipment from civilian materials. They saw humans treating the invasion not as a disaster but as a learning experience that would make them stronger. In Texas, they watched ranchers who had used their experience with large predators to develop tactics for hunting alien heavy infantry across open terrain. These humans rode horses and used lassos and firearms to bring down aliens who had been designed to survive on the most dangerous worlds in the galaxy. The ranchers treated hunting aliens like just another job that needed to be done. The journey through Colorado showed them the most frightening sight of all. Human military facilities where captured alien technology was being studied and improved by scientists who worked around the clock to understand every detail of how it functioned. The humans were not just defending themselves but preparing to take the war to their enemies. When the 5 survivors finally reached their escape pod at a remote site in Nevada, they were no longer the confident warriors who had participated in the invasion. They had seen their entire understanding of warfare and technology systematically dismantled by a species they had been taught to consider primitive and weak. Colonel Paul Anderson commanded the facility where the escape pod was hidden, and he delivered humanity's final message to the alien survivors. He told them to inform their empire that Earth was claimed territory, and that humanity did not surrender or retreat or forgive attacks on their world. He explained that if the Empire wanted to continue their war against Earth, they would have to face humans who now possessed alien technology improved by human engineering and human tactical doctrine. The escape pod launched into the night sky, carrying its 5 passengers and their terrible knowledge back toward the stars. Behind them, they left a world that had been fundamentally changed by their invasion. Humanity had been forced to unite against an external threat and had discovered exactly how dangerous they could be when they stopped fighting each other and started working together. The pod disappeared into the darkness between stars, carrying a message that would change how the entire galaxy thought about the small blue world called Earth. The 5 survivors knew they were returning to an empire that would have to decide whether conquering one planet was worth risking a war against the most dangerous species any of them had ever encountered.